The morning light crept gently through the blinds of a small suburban neighborhood in Fairfield, New Jersey. It was one of those peaceful days that start without warning of what's to come. People were leaving for work, children waited for school buses, and the town's quiet rhythm carried on, completely unaware that inside one home, something horrific had just taken place. In the basement apartment of that modest house, Marie Zoppi, a kind and soft-spoken woman, lay lifeless on the floor. Her family and neighbors knew her as caring, gentle, the sort of person who'd never hurt anyone. But this morning, she was gone. Near her body lay a handwritten note, trembling words scratched onto paper. "Tell the kids I love them. You don't need me." At first glance, it seemed tragic but straightforward, a suicide born from sadness. Detectives approached the scene quietly, expecting grief, not suspicion. But as they examined the room, small inconsistencies began to whisper their truth. There were no signs of struggle, yet something about the blood spatter didn't fit. The necktie, oddly knotted, strangely placed, caught their attention. The more they looked, the less it resembled self-inflicted harm. And standing there, just a few feet away, was Marie's daughter, Tina Lunney. Her demeanor struck the officers immediately. Calm. Collected. Even courteous. Her voice was soft, her words carefully chosen. She told them her mother had been feeling depressed, that she'd been under stress. But there was something in Tina's eyes, a strange stillness that felt out of place, like she was performing a role she'd rehearsed too many times. The officers left that day uneasy, the kind of unease that lingers even when you try to ignore it. By evening, the note was bagged as evidence, the crime scene sealed, and whispers began circling the precinct. What had seemed like a suicide was no longer certain, and before the night was over, Tina Lunney's name quietly moved from witness to person of interest. The morning after Marie Zoppi's death, Fairfield police received another unexpected call. This time, it wasn't about Marie, it was about her daughter. Tina Lunney was missing. Her husband, Christopher, sounded worried but confused. He told officers that Tina had left the house without her phone, wallet, or any explanation. It didn't seem like she was running, more like she had vanished. For 3 days, there was no sign of her. No sightings. No messages. Just silence. The same calm, eerie silence that now surrounded both mother and daughter. Then, on the third morning, July 27th, a patrol officer spotted a woman walking slowly along a quiet suburban street. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair disheveled, and her eyes looked empty. It was Tina. When the officers approached her, she didn't resist. She seemed dazed, lost in her own thoughts, as if she'd been walking for days without knowing where she was going. The only thing she asked, again and again, was, "Have you seen my kids? Are they okay?" At the prosecutor's office, Tina wasn't treated like a criminal. She wasn't handcuffed or accused. Detectives offered her water, spoke softly, and acted like this was just a welfare check. But behind the polite smiles and calm tones, they already knew something chilling. Marie Zoppi hadn't taken her own life. She had been murdered. Inside the small, windowless interview room, Tina sat across from the lead investigators. Her face was blank, her voice quiet. They started gently, asking about her mother, about the morning of her disappearance, about the note. For a while, she spoke in circles, detached and vague. Then suddenly, without warning, she leaned forward and whispered. "You want to know what happened to my mother? I'll tell you." The room froze. One detective raised his hand, signaling the others to stop her. They rushed to grab the video camera. This was no longer a missing person interview. When they returned and pressed record, Tina looked straight ahead, expressionless. The next word she spoke would change everything, turning what once looked like a tragic suicide into something far darker. Within minutes, the truth would begin to surface. And once it did, there would be no going back. Top of form. The camera started rolling, its small red light blinking in the corner of the room. Across the table, Tina Lunney sat slouched in her chair, tired, detached, yet strangely calm. There were no tears, no visible fear. She looked like someone who had already accepted what was coming. When detectives asked her to start from the beginning, she simply nodded and began to speak. "It started early that morning," she said quietly. Her tone was flat, almost lifeless. "Mom came upstairs to make coffee. We talked a little, nothing important." She paused for a moment, staring down at her hands. "Then she asked me to put cream on her neck. She said it was sore." Her words came slow, deliberate. She described walking over to help her mother, the familiar routine, something she'd probably done countless times before. But this time, something changed. "I saw one of Chris's ties," Tina continued. "It was lying near the fridge. I don't know why, but I just picked it up." The detectives leaned forward. Tina looked up, eyes distant. "I don't even remember thinking about it. I just did it." She mimed the motion with her hands, pulling an invisible tie tight. Her voice never broke. She struggled. "Tried to grab me. I held on. Then she fell. And then, she didn't move." Silence filled the room. Even the air seemed to stop. Tina said she sat there for a long time, just staring. "I couldn't believe what I'd done," she whispered. "I didn't mean to kill her. I just wanted her to stop yelling." After that, she said, she dragged Marie's body into the living room and sat on the couch, breathing heavily, staring into nothing. Minutes passed before she stood up, walked over to her mother's desk, and picked up a notepad. She wrote the suicide note, the one police found later near the body. Then, with eerie composure, she locked the door, went upstairs, got dressed, and called her workplace. "I told them I'd be late," she said. Later that morning, Tina drove to the office, smiled at coworkers, and carried on as though nothing had happened. She even told one friend she needed to leave early, her mother wasn't feeling well. But the truth was, Marie Zoppi wasn't sick. She was already dead, and her killer was pretending that everything was perfectly normal. After the killing, Tina Lunney tried to stitch together a story that might save her, a fragile web of lies built on panic and desperation. She told her husband, Christopher, that her mother had gone to visit her brother, Joseph. To make it believable, she left a suicide note near the couch and locked the basement door behind her. The plan was simple: act shocked later, cry a little, and let everyone believe it was a tragic suicide. When Christopher came home, Tina played her role perfectly. Her voice trembled, her hands shook, and her eyes filled with forced tears. She handed him the note and whispered, "She's gone." Christopher, confused and terrified, called 911 immediately. Police arrived within minutes. They found Marie lying face down, a necktie still around her neck, blood on the carpet, and a blanket covering her body. The note, written on Marie's stationery, said, "Tell the kids I love them. You don't need me." At first glance, it looked believable. But to seasoned detectives, something felt off. The staging was too deliberate, too clean. And Tina's performance, though emotional, felt hollow. There were no signs of forced entry, no suicide weapon, and the bruising on Marie's neck didn't match self-inflicted strangulation. As the investigation deepened, Tina's world began to unravel. Her financial life was in shambles: overdue mortgage payments, maxed-out credit cards, bounced checks, even threats of foreclosure. Detectives discovered that right after her mother's death, Tina had used Marie's credit cards to pay bills, clear debts, and even make payments for an upcoming family vacation. The motive became clearer with every new discovery. It wasn't rage, it was money. But Tina wasn't done lying. As detectives pieced the truth together, she disappeared. She left her home, walked for miles, hitched rides, took buses, and eventually ended up in Atlantic City, a place she used to visit with her mother. Witnesses later said she looked dazed, lost, sometimes even laughing to herself. She gambled, shopped, wandered through crowded places, anything to distract herself from what she'd done. It was like she was running from reality, trying to bury her guilt under noise and movement. But guilt has a way of catching up. When police finally found her days later, walking alone on a quiet street in Fairfield, she looked exhausted, a woman whose lies had run out. And this time, she wasn't treated as a missing person. She was under arrest, for the murder of her own mother. When Tina Lunney's case finally reached the courtroom, it felt like two stories colliding head-on. The prosecution painted her as a manipulative woman, one who murdered her own mother out of greed, desperate to escape the weight of her financial ruin. The defense, on the other hand, described her as broken, a woman lost in her mind, suffering from a psychotic break, detached from reality and unaware of her own actions. Psychiatrists filled the witness stand, each with a different version of Tina's mind. Dr. Robert Latimer, a forensic psychiatrist, testified that Tina was in a dissociative fugue, a state where the mind disconnects from reality to escape emotional trauma. He said she wasn't in control when she killed her mother. But then came Dr. Azariah Ashkenazi, the state's expert, who countered everything. According to him, Tina was calm, rational, and completely aware of what she was doing. Her actions after the crime, writing a fake suicide note, using her mother's credit cards, staging the scene, showed calculation, not confusion. When the jury watched her videotaped confession, everything changed. Tina didn't cry. She didn't tremble. Her tone was even, her words chillingly clear. She described the act as if reading from a list, how she looped the tie, how her mother fell, how she wrote the note. There was no panic. No remorse. Just cold, steady detachment. The courtroom fell silent. Whatever sympathy the jury might have had was gone. The verdict was swift. Tina Lunney was found guilty of murdering her mother, Marie Zoppi, and sentenced to 40 years in prison. To this day, people still debate who Tina really was, a mentally ill woman pushed beyond her limits, or a selfish daughter who chose greed over love. Some say she lost control, others believe she simply lost her conscience. But in the end, one fact stands unshakable: Tina took the life of the woman who gave her everything: love, shelter, family, and trust. And now, the home that once echoed with laughter and warmth stands forever in shadow, a quiet reminder that sometimes, the darkest crimes don't come from strangers. They come from within the family. Top of form. Bottom of form.